Now we examine the last few weeks of diplomacy with North Korea and the decision by President Trump to call off the summit with Kim Jong-un. Foreign Affairs correspondent Nick Schifrin is back for that.
Judy, thank you very much. I'm joined by Christopher Hill. He served as the chief U.S. negotiator with North Korea during the George W. Bush administration and as U.S. ambassador to South Korea. And Jenny Town, the managing editor and producer of 38 North, an online policy journal on North Korea, and welcome to you both. Thank you very much. Jenny Town, let me begin with you. In your opinion, why do you think this fell apart?
Well, I think the real challenge started when John Bolton did make the comments, starting to talk about the Libya model. And of course, we all know how Libya turned out. And so if you're North Korea receiving those messages, you've gotten the sense that the U.S. wants this process to be very quick. They want it to be the security guarantees on paper, and without changing the actual nature of our political relationship. And so if you're North Korea, you're looking at this as sort of a veiled threat, as and then the president following up afterwards by saying, oh, well, if you don't make a deal, you will end up like Libya. And there's oftentimes, the North Koreans have said before, they're not going to negotiate with a gun to their head. And so there's really the behavior that they've shown in the past couple of days and past couple of weeks is really predictable given the way that they've been treated.
Ambassador Hill, is this about the Libya model and the administration's use of it, or is there also a substantive disagreement about the nature of denuclearization?
I think there's a substantive disagreement. I'm not sure the North Koreans were really ready to give up their nuclear weapons or nuclear weapons programs, especially as the Trump administration has been saying in recent weeks, we're not giving anything up. We're not going to be like those guys before. No sanctions relief. We're not going to do this until they've really given up all their programs. I think that probably worried them. And I think the Trump administration got a little worried, especially when some of the North Koreans took to the airwaves, such as Kim Dae-gwan, to say that somehow you certainly don't expect us to give up our nuclear weapons for just economic assistance, which actually is what they are expecting them to do. So I think both sides got very nervous. I must say, I hope the Trump administration takes this as an opportunity to review its diplomatic tradecraft, review public messaging as they go toward a very difficult summit. And frankly, I think there's a little room for improvement there.
Jenny Town, you were shaking your head a little bit during that. Do you believe that North Korea is serious about denuclearization?
I think they're absolutely serious about the negotiation process and getting to denuclearization. But I think when the North Koreans approach this, it's a much different thinking. The U.S. only cares about North Korea's nuclear weapons program, and they sort of project what they think the North Koreans want and have sort of discounted what the North Koreans actually say they want. And the problem is when the North Koreans are approaching this, they are looking at more of a holistic view of what that relationship actually means. And so it's not enough just to try and buy them off, but security guarantees mean nothing when you have no trust between your countries. And so, having something on paper, even if it's signed, we've all seen agreements fall apart from administration to administration, as far back as the agreed framework to now as recent as the Iran deal. And John Bolton was there for both instances. And so I think this is one of those cases where, sure, you might not believe, but if you don't try, first of all, you'll never know. But certainly North Korea is in a position right now where they were serious about negotiations. They were doing unilateral actions to try and create that momentum for it. But at the same time, again, they're not going to do it unilaterally, and they're not going to do it with a gun to their head.
Ambassador Hill, in that sense, they're not going to do it unilaterally. They're not going to do it with a gun to their head. Are U.S. expectations, were U.S. expectations going into the summit perhaps too high?
I think they were perhaps too high in the sense that somehow in a one-off summit, you could get the North Koreans to essentially say, we're giving up all our weapons and we're giving them up now. Now, that said, the North Koreans do ask for broader concepts, which is why when I was doing this, we put together a peace treaty, we put together cross-recognition of states, we talked about a lot of different things in that agreement. And it seems that when the North Koreans ask for these kind of broad things, and then you move heaven and earth in Washington to get everyone to agree, and you bring it back to the North Koreans and say, voila, look what we've done. and then they seem to be disinterested in it. So I'm afraid this does come down to the question of denuclearization and whether they are prepared to do that. I told them on numerous occasions that with denuclearization, everything is possible. I didn't perhaps go as far as President Trump has gone in that regard, but I said with it, everything's possible, but if you don't denuclearize, frankly, nothing is possible. And I think the stakes are, I think it's pretty stark, and I think the North Koreans really do have some thinking to do because they need to decide whether having nuclear weapons offers them a better future, and I don't think it does, and I think we ought to keep at it. And I do not agree with those who say we need to accept somehow nuclear North Korea, kind of live with it and contain it or something. I think we continue to need to do what the president has been saying, which is denuclearization.
Jenny Town, this is a peninsula. We're talking about North Korea. We're also talking about South Korea, the U.S.-South Korean alliance. Is there any threat to that alliance today?
Well, I mean, this is a really bad way to have announced it. The way that Donald Trump did this was really the worst way possible and the worst timing possible, especially with Moon Jae-in just leaving Washington thinking everything was on track. And so I think it goes to some of the antagonism that the South Koreans have felt under this administration, resurfacing once again and manifesting once again in a very important issue and one that Moon has put so much personal capital in as well. So it's really bad form.
And Ambassador Hill, quickly, in the time we have left, what's next? The U.S. says the ball is in North Korea's court. What's the likely response, and what are we expected to see next?
Well, it was quite a remarkable letter that the president evidently put together there. I do hope the parts in it which deal with continuing the dialogue are real. I think it's very important for the Trump administration to have a team of people. It doesn't have to be the Secretary of State. It can be an assistant secretary. It can be an office director. But they need to be able to keep sounding out the North Koreans on what might be possible. Look, if North Korea can come to the understanding that we can accept a lot from them, but we cannot accept a nuclear state, then I think things can be done. I think the president has tried in his own kind of his own way to suggest that he's willing to live with North Korea and live with them very well if they give up their nuclear weapons. So I hope we can continue that and put away this sort of my nuclear arsenal is bigger than your nuclear arsenal.
Ambassador Hill, thank you very much. We'll have to leave it there. Ambassador Christopher Hill and Jenny Town, thank you very much.